The morning started quietly, the way most mornings did on that street. The air was cool, and the sky still had that soft early light that makes everything look calm and peaceful. The homeowner stepped outside with his coffee, expecting the usual routine of opening the garage, checking a few things inside, and getting ready for the day. But the moment he walked to the end of his driveway, his steps slowed, and his eyebrows pulled together. 2 large trucks were parked right across the entrance of his garage, not slightly blocking it, not close to it, completely covering the whole opening from one end to the other, as if someone purposely measured the space and decided to fill every inch. He stared at them for a moment, trying to make sense of it. They were big work trucks, the kind used by people who did heavy labor or maybe delivery jobs. They had no company logo, no markings, nothing to identify who they belonged to. He walked around them, taking a slow breath, hoping maybe there was some reasonable explanation. But inside, he already felt the quiet frustration building. He genuinely didn't like conflict. He liked peaceful days, quiet neighbors, and simple solutions. But there was no way to pretend this was small. He needed access to his garage every day, and right now he couldn't even step inside. He checked the street to see if anyone was around. A few houses down, an older neighbor watering plants noticed him looking around and waved. "Those trucks aren't yours, right?" she asked. He shook his head. "No idea whose they are?" The woman made a face like she already knew the answer. "They're probably hers," she said quietly, nodding toward a house a little further down the block. He followed her gaze. The house belonged to a newer resident. She had only moved in a few months ago, but she had made her presence known instantly. Loud arguments on the phone outside, constant complaints about little things, and a habit of parking however she wanted, sometimes sideways, sometimes too close to someone else's driveway. And once, even on a patch of grass that clearly wasn't hers, he hadn't spoken to her much. Just a polite wave here and there. He tried to stay positive, believing maybe she simply needed time to settle in. But now, with her trucks blocking his garage, he felt an uneasy guess forming. He thanked the neighbor, finished his coffee, and walked toward her house. The trucks weren't going to move themselves, and he hoped the conversation wouldn't turn into something more dramatic than it needed to be. He knocked on her door. At first, there was no response. He knocked again, gently but loud enough to be heard. After a moment, the door opened, and she stepped out, holding her phone as if he'd interrupted something important. Her expression wasn't annoyed, it was worse. It was the kind of look someone gives when they think the world owes them something. "What?" she asked, not even pretending to be polite. He kept his voice calm. "Good morning. I think those 2 trucks parked in front of my garage. Are they yours?" She raised an eyebrow like the question bothered her. "Yeah, I parked them there last night. Why?" He blinked slowly, trying to understand the casual confidence in her voice. "They're blocking my whole garage. I need to use it." She shrugged as if this was the smallest issue in the world. "I needed somewhere to park. Your driveway area was empty. It's private property," he explained gently. "I can't get inside my garage at all." "I'll move them later," she said. Waving her hand and turning to go back inside, he stepped slightly forward, not aggressively, just enough to try and stop her from ending the conversation so quickly. "I really need them moved now. I use my garage early in the morning." She looked over her shoulder, annoyed. "I said later. I'm busy." Then she closed the door. He stood there for a moment, feeling the kind of disbelief that leaves you speechless. It wasn't that she refused, it was the way she acted, like he was wrong for even asking. He walked back toward his house, trying to stay calm. He had always believed that most problems could be solved with simple conversation, but the tone, the attitude, the disregard, it all made something inside him tighten. Still, he wasn't the type to get angry quickly. He decided he would wait a little and give her a chance to cool down. Maybe she was having a stressful morning. Maybe she didn't think about how it affected him, but hours went by. The truck stayed exactly where they were. As the day continued, he noticed something else. She came outside multiple times, once to talk to a delivery driver, once to take out her trash, Once to get something from her car. Each time, she saw the trucks. Each time she ignored them. She wasn't too busy. She simply didn't care. By noon, he approached again, hoping she might be more willing to talk. He knocked. She opened the door with the same expression as before. "It's been several hours," he said kindly but firmly. "Can you please move the trucks? I honestly need access to my garage." She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "I told you I'll move them later." "You've been outside several times already," she cut him off. "Are you keeping track of me now?" He shook his head quickly. No. I just need the space so I can use my garage," she scoffed. "It's not like you're running a business out of there. You can wait." Her words stopped him. Not because he was offended, but because of how wrong she was. He didn't run a business out of it. But the garage wasn't just for his personal use. It had a very specific purpose. A purpose that involved people who didn't appreciate being blocked. He swallowed the urge to tell her right then and there. For now, he decided not to start an argument. Instead, he walked back home again. But this time he felt something shift inside him. She wasn't going to move those trucks anytime soon. Maybe not even today. Maybe she would leave them there as long as she wanted, simply because she could. He knew enough from watching her behavior with other neighbors. She did things like this often. Parking too close to someone's driveway. Leaving her trash bins sitting out for days. Complaining about people's gardens being too messy. She had a bad habit of acting like the whole street belonged to her. He didn't want to turn this into a fight. But he also knew he couldn't let someone block private property without consequences. Not when it affected something important. He sat inside his house for a while, thinking things through. He wasn't angry, just disappointed. Disappointed that someone could be so careless and disrespectful for no real reason. As the sun began to lower, painting the sky softer again, he stepped outside and looked at the trucks once more. They hadn't moved an inch. If anything, it felt like they were sitting there proudly, as if she put them there to prove some sort of point. He took out his phone. For the first time that day, he felt the need to call someone. Not to argue. Not to threaten. Just to inform, because she had no idea that blocking that garage wasn't just blocking him. It was blocking the sheriff's department. And sooner or later, someone was going to show up asking why their access was taken away. He took a calm breath and prepared for the next step. Knowing this was no longer about being patient or polite. It was about doing what needed to be done. And he knew that when the truth finally reached her, she would realize she had made a much bigger mistake than she ever expected. The next morning arrived with the same quiet air. But his mood was different. He stepped outside hoping, even if only a little, that the trucks might be gone. Maybe she had second thoughts. Maybe she realized how unreasonable it was. Maybe the night gave her time to reflect. But when he turned toward his driveway, found the same 2 trucks sitting exactly where they were before. Not moved an inch. Not even a sign someone had come near them. He stood there for a long moment, feeling the weight of the situation settle deeper inside him. He wasn't someone who liked making trouble. He always believed problems could be solved with simple conversation. But this wasn't a simple misunderstanding anymore. This was someone deliberately ignoring him, ignoring common sense, and ignoring what was right. He walked a little closer to the trucks, inspecting them again. The sun made the metal surfaces shine, and the shadows stretched across the concrete as if the trucks were proudly claiming the space. He tried opening his garage door just for a moment, but the trucks blocked it so tightly that he stopped halfway. It felt wrong even trying. A quick sweep of the street told him what he already suspected neighbors were watching. Curtains shifted. Small movements behind windows. They all knew something was going on. No one wanted to step into the middle of it. He couldn't blame them. The new neighbor had caused tension before. 2 houses down, someone once complained because she parked in front of their gate for 3 days straight. Another neighbor said she argued over the placement of recycling bins. The stories went on, and ain't none of them dangerous, just frustrating. And now he finally understood what they meant when they said she does what she wants and doesn't listen to anyone. He took a slow breath, preparing himself to speak to her again. Maybe today she would be different. Maybe she'd finally move the trucks. He walked toward her house, knocked lightly at first, then a bit louder. It took about a minute before the door opened. She stood there wearing the same uninterested expression, holding a cup of something warm. "What now?" she asked. He kept his voice steady. "Morning. The trucks are still blocking my garage. Can you please move them today? I really need access." She sighed as if he was asking her to move a mountain. "I said I'll do it later. I've got things to do." "You said that yesterday too," he replied gently. "But they stayed there all day and all night."
Ow!
She shrugged again as if that fact didn't matter. "I didn't get around to it." "They're on private property," he reminded her softly. "That spot looked empty when I got home," she said, brushing off the point entirely. "It's not public parking. It's a private driveway connecting to my garage." She gave a slight smirk, almost mocking. "Well, you don't seem to use the garage anyway. So what's the problem?" He blinked, taken aback. "How would you know if I use it or not?" "I just don't see you going in and out of it all the time," she replied. "It's not like you have something important in there." He held back the urge to tell her the truth. Not yet. He could feel her stubbornness turning every simple sentence into a challenge. He tried one last time. "I'm asking politely. Please move the trucks today." "You're being dramatic," she said. "I'll move them when I feel like it." Then she closed the door again. He stood there silently. Realizing something important, she had no intention of moving those trucks anytime soon. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not unless she was forced to. He walked back to his house, feeling a strange mix of frustration and calm. He wasn't angry, not the kind that makes a person shout or slam doors. Instead, he felt disappointed. Disappointed that a simple request turned into a battle of ego. Disappointed that someone could look at a problem so clear and still refuse to fix it inside the house. He sat for a while at the kitchen table, his fingers lightly tapping against the surface. He didn't want to bother anyone. He didn't want to escalate anything. But he also couldn't let this continue. Not when the garage wasn't just for personal use. His contract mattered. It mattered to the people who expected access. And if they arrived to find two huge trucks blocking their storage space, they wouldn't take it lightly. They would have questions. And those questions wouldn't be pleasant for anyone involved. He decided to give her one more chance before taking the next step. Not because she deserved it, but because he wanted to be sure he had done everything possible to handle things kindly. That afternoon, he walked toward the street and found her standing near one of the trucks, talking to a friend. It seemed like a good moment to try again calmly, respectfully. He approached with a small wave. "Sorry to interrupt. Can I just speak with you for a moment?" She turned with the same annoyed look, but now her friend glanced between them curiously. "What now?" she asked, sounding tired of him even though he had barely spoken. "The trucks," he said gently. "I need the space cleared. It's been over a day." She rolled her eyes dramatically, loud enough for her friend to notice. "He's still going on about that garage," she told her friend, laughing lightly. Her friend tried to stay neutral, but didn't hide the awkwardness. He kept calm. "Please, I'm asking respectfully. You're blocking my only access." She lifted her chin. "I'll move them when I'm done with what I parked them for. They're staying there for now." He felt a sinking feeling inside him. That was it. That was the real answer. Not later, not soon. She wanted to leave them there for as long as she wanted, and she didn't care about who it affected. He nodded quietly. "All right." He turned away and walked back toward his home. Not because he gave up, but because he finally understood that no more talking would fix this. As he walked back, he noticed something from the corner of his eye. A few neighbors had stepped outside pretending to check their mail or sweep their driveway. But really, they were watching the exchange. They had seen the same pattern before. They knew how she treated people, and now they were watching it happen again. Some offered him sympathetic looks. Others simply nodded as if saying, "We understand." He appreciated the silent support, even if none of them wanted to get directly involved. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky orange and pink. He stood in his driveway looking at the trucks again, their huge shapes casting long shadows. For a moment, he wondered what made someone behave like that. why someone would choose stubbornness over kindness, why someone would dismiss simple requests so easily. But he didn't stay stuck in the thought. He already knew what he needed to do. Inside his house, he reached for his phone. His fingers hovered over the contact for a moment before pressing the call button. The person answered immediately with a familiar voice, calm, professional. He explained everything. How the trucks were blocking the garage, how he'd asked politely. How she refused again and again. The voice on the other end didn't sound surprised. "Don't worry," the caller said. "We'll take care of it. Just leave him there for now." He nodded, even though the caller couldn't see him. "All right." When he hung up, he felt something he hadn't felt since the trucks appeared: relief. He didn't feel guilty about calling. He had given her every chance. More than she deserved, honestly. And the garage wasn't an ordinary garage. The people who leased it expected clean access. They expected cooperation. And if someone blocked that access, they had every right to step in. Night fell softly over the street. Porch lights came on. The trucks continued sitting there like stubborn reminders of the day's trouble. But now, the situation wasn't in his hands anymore. He didn't know exactly when it would happen or how she would react. But he knew the trucks wouldn't stay there much longer. And he also knew that once the people in charge got involved, the problem would unfold in a way she never saw coming. She thought she was just blocking a garage. She had no idea. She was blocking the sheriff's department. And soon, she was going to learn why that was the worst mistake she could have made. He woke up the next morning with a different kind of feeling in his chest. Not worry. Not frustration. Something closer to certainty. He had done everything a reasonable person could do. He had asked politely, waited patiently, approached calmly, and tried to find a peaceful middle ground. But none of it mattered to her. She had brushed him off over and over again as if his words had no weight at all. Now, it was up to the people who actually had authority over the space she was blocking. When he stepped outside, the trucks still stood there, huge, stubborn, unmoved. The morning light hit their metal frames, almost making them look like they belonged there. But he knew they didn't, and he also knew they wouldn't be there much longer. He stood for a moment at the end of his driveway, sipping his coffee quietly. The street was calm. Birds hopped along the sidewalks looking for early food. A neighbor jogged by, offering him a sympathetic nod before continuing down the road. He wondered briefly what she would think once she realized what she had done. Once she realized that she wasn't just blocking one person's garage, she was blocking the sheriff's department's equipment. She was interfering with something that wasn't hers, and something she had no permission to touch. He didn't take joy in imagining her reaction. But he also didn't feel sorry. Actions had consequences, and she had pushed this situation far beyond what any neighbor should have to deal with. Around mid-morning, he heard the sound of a vehicle stopping near the curb. When he looked out the window, he saw a familiar white SUV with official markings on the side. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. It was the quiet kind of official vehicle that didn't need to draw attention because everyone already knew what it represented. A deputy stepped out, someone he had spoken too many times before during routine check-ins related to the lease agreement. The deputy looked at the trucks, took a few slow steps toward them, and shook his head as if confirming exactly what was described on the phone. He walked outside to greet him. "Morning," the deputy said in a calm, professional voice. "Morning," he replied. "Thanks for coming." The deputy nodded. "You weren't exaggerating. They're completely blocking access." He gave a small, tired smile. "I tried everything I could to talk to her." "I know," the deputy answered. "And you followed the right steps. Now let's see what she has to say." The deputy walked toward her house and knocked firmly, not rudely. Just with the kind of authority that made people listen before they even opened the door. It took a few moments before she appeared, pulling the door open with what looked like mild annoyance. But when she saw the uniform, her expression flickered. Not fear, more like discomfort mixed with surprise. "Yes?" she asked, trying to sound normal. "Good morning, ma'am," the deputy said politely. "I'm here about the trucks parked in front of this garage. glanced toward the trucks and then back at the deputy. What about them? They're blocking a space used by the sheriff's department. We need you to move them immediately. Her face shifted again, confusion now, mixed with disbelief. What do you mean the sheriff's department uses that garage? The deputy kept his tone neutral. The property is officially leased to us. We store equipment inside, and we need constant access. Blocking it isn't allowed. She blinked several times, as if trying to understand whether this was a joke. I didn't know that. You were told it's private property, the deputy reminded her. And that should have been enough. Her expression tightened. He didn't tell me it was for the sheriff. The deputy looked at the homeowner, then back at her. He didn't need to. It's private property. That alone means you can't block it. She crossed her arms stubbornly. I was going to move them. The deputy nodded politely, though his expression didn't change. Then please do so now. It's interfering with our access. Instead of responding immediately, she hesitated. A hesitation filled not with fear, but with ego. She looked at the deputy, then at the trucks, then back at him, trying to decide whether she wanted to cooperate or argue. After a long moment, she said, I'm busy right now. I can move them later. The deputy didn't get frustrated. His voice didn't change. He simply said, if you do not move them right now, we will have them towed. Her mouth fell open slightly. You can't tow them. You can, he said calmly. And we will. They are blocking official property access. She looked again at the trucks, then at the street, then at the deputy. Her confidence wavered, but she didn't fully back down. This is ridiculous, she muttered. They're just trucks. The deputy kept his voice steady. And you are blocking a county-leased area. We need access. This is not optional. For the first time, she looked genuinely unsure. She stepped back inside the doorway, glancing behind her as if debating what to do. Then, instead of agreeing, she made the choice that sealed what would happen next. She said, Fine. Do whatever you want, and closed the door. The deputy exhaled slowly, then turned to the homeowner. All right, then. He nodded quietly, though a small part of him still couldn't believe she chose that path. I figured she wouldn't cooperate. The deputy reached for his radio. I'll call for the tow trucks. It didn't take long. Within 30 minutes, another official vehicle arrived, followed by a tow truck with heavy equipment capable of removing vehicles as large as the ones blocking the driveway. By now, the neighbors had begun to gather quietly, respectfully, pretending to check plants or sweep walkways. But clearly watching, they had lived through moments like this before, though maybe not as serious. And they all seemed to share the same unspoken thought. It was bound to happen eventually. The tow truck operators examined the two vehicles, made notes, and prepared the necessary paperwork. The deputy knocked on her door one more time, giving her a final opportunity. Ma'am, he called, tow trucks are here. This is your last chance to move the vehicles yourself. From inside came her muffled voice. I told you I'm busy. The deputy nodded at the operators. Proceed. What followed wasn't loud or dramatic. No shouting, no scene. Just the sound of heavy machinery being set up, metal hooks connecting, and the slow, careful tightening of chains. The homeowner stood beside the deputy, watching quietly. He didn't feel excited or angry, just relieved that the situation was finally being handled by people who knew exactly what to do. As the first truck was lifted slightly off the ground, her door flew open. She rushed outside, her expression filled with disbelief. Wait, what are you doing? The deputy spoke calmly. We gave you multiple chances to move them. You refused. Can't just take them. She argued, panic rising in her voice. They are blocking official access, he reminded her. You were informed of this. She ran toward the trucks but was stopped by the tow operator, who politely held out a hand. Ma'am, please stay back for your safety. But it's already in process, the deputy said. You'll be given the paperwork, and you can retrieve the vehicles once the fees are paid. Her frustration grew, but this time she had no ground to stand on. She opened her mouth to argue more, but nothing came out. Instead, she watched as the first truck was pulled slowly away from the driveway. Her shoulders sank. Her face softened, not with understanding, but with disbelief and embarrassment. The second truck followed soon after. The tow trucks drove off, leaving the driveway clear for the first time in days. She stood there in silence, staring at the empty space as if trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. Then her eyes turned toward him. He didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He simply nodded politely and walked back toward his house. The deputy followed, giving him a small pat on the shoulder. "You handled this the right way," the deputy said quietly. "You've tried everything before calling us. This outcome wasn't on you." "Thank you," he replied softly. "I just wanted things to be simple." The deputy offered a calm smile. "Sometimes people make simple things complicated, but it's taken care of now." As the deputy returned to his vehicle, several neighbors stepped out to offer words of support, some quietly saying, "You did the right thing," others simply giving a nod of approval. He appreciated the kindness, but mostly he felt relief. The trucks were gone. The garage was no longer blocked, and the people responsible for the property had handled everything professionally. The street grew calm again. The tension lifted like fog disappearing in the morning sun, and while he didn't know what she would do next, he did know one thing for certain. The situation was no longer his burden. It belonged to whoever she needed to answer to. Now, what she didn't realize was that this was only the beginning of what her choices had set in motion. The next morning arrived quietly. But inside the garage owner's mind, nothing felt quiet at all. He had barely slept, replaying every moment from the previous day in his head. The trucks blocking his garage, the uneasy conversation with the woman who insisted she had every right to park there, and the reminder that the space was actually leased to the sheriff's department. All of it twisted together like a knot he couldn't fully untangle. He knew things were going to get more complicated before they got better. He reached the garage early, long before anyone else would think of starting their day. The air was crisp, and the sun was only beginning to peek over the rooftops, painting the street in soft light. He unlocked the gate, stepped inside, and took a slow breath as he looked over the empty space. It was strange how calm the garage felt now compared to the chaos of yesterday, but the calm didn't last. Just as he began reviewing paperwork, he heard the unmistakable sound of a diesel engine rumbling outside. His heart sank not again. When he walked out, sure enough, the same two trucks were back, parked exactly where they shouldn't be, blocking the entrance like a wall. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying hard to keep his frustration under control. He wanted to think clearly, to stay calm, to avoid any drama. But it was harder than he expected. A few moments later, the woman stepped out of her truck. She looked confident, almost smug, as if she believed she had already won some imaginary battle. Before she could say anything, he tried to stay polite. "Look, we talked about this yesterday. I really need you to move these trucks. This isn't just my space. This garage is leased to the sheriff's department. They can show up anytime." She crossed her arms. "You keep saying that, but I don't see anyone from the sheriff's department here. Maybe you're just trying to scare me. Besides, the street was crowded, and I needed a place to park. I'm not hurting anything." He felt the tension rising again. "I'm not trying to scare you. I'm telling you the truth. And even if they weren't involved, this is still private property. I need access to the garage." She shrugged as if none of it mattered. "Well, I'm going to be here for a while. You'll have to deal with it." He stood there for a moment, not sure what else to say, and unsure why she was pushing this so far. She didn't seem interested in fairness or reason outly in getting her way. He went back inside the garage and tried to distract himself with work. But his mind kept drifting. Why was she so determined to park there? Was it really just about finding a convenient spot, or was something else going on? He couldn't figure it out. After an hour passed, he finally decided he couldn't wait anymore. The sheriff's department had access to the garage, and if they arrived unexpectedly to find the entrance blocked, it would turn into a mess one he didn't want on his hands. He reached for his phone and called his contact at the sheriff's office. The man picked up quickly. "Hey, I think we've got a problem," the garage owner said. "Those trucks are back, blocking the entrance again. I talked to the woman yesterday, but she's refusing to move them." There was a brief pause, then his contact replied, "All right. We'll handle it. Just hang tight," ended the call and tried to calm himself. He wasn't trying to get the woman in trouble. He just wanted his property respected. Nothing more, nothing less. More time passed, and the woman seemed completely unfazed. She sat in her truck scrolling on her phone, sipping a drink, acting as though she were parked in her own driveway. After a while, 2 sheriff's department vehicles approached. Their presence was calm but serious. The woman noticed them immediately and straightened up with a worried expression. One of the officers stepped out and greeted the garage owner politely before walking toward the woman. "Ma'am, you're parked on private property. This garage is leased to the sheriff's department, and the entrance needs to stay clear at all times." The woman looked confused, then defensive. "He said that yesterday too, but I thought he was exaggerating." "I didn't think it was that serious." The officer remained calm. "It is serious. We use this space regularly, and we can't have it blocked. I'm going to need you to move the trucks now." Her attitude shifted quickly. The confidence she had shown earlier faded, replaced with embarrassment and frustration. She got out of the truck and began walking back and forth, mumbling to herself. "I wasn't trying to cause trouble," she said finally, her voice softer now. "I just needed a place to park. The street is always full." The officer nodded politely but stayed firm. "We understand, but this isn't the place to park. You need to move the vehicles now." Slowly, she climbed into her trucks and moved them away from the entrance. The moment the path cleared, the tension in the garage owner's chest loosened. He thanked the officers quietly, but the officers didn't leave right away. They stayed back a moment to speak privately with him. "We can put this on record if you want," one of them said. "Blocking this space can cause real issues for us. If it keeps happening, let us know." He nodded. "I appreciate that. I'm not trying to make a big problem out of this, but I need access to my space." "We get it," the officer replied. "If she comes back and blocks it again, call us." As the sheriff's vehicles pulled away, the garage owner felt a sense of relief, but also worry. He had a feeling this wasn't the end of it. The woman seemed stubborn. People like her often didn't back down easily. Later in the afternoon, he tried to focus on his work again, but the morning's events stayed in the back of his mind. He kept thinking about the way she had reacted, how quickly she had gone from controlling and confident to embarrassed and quiet. Once the officers showed up, he wondered if she would learn from the situation or if she would return with even more determination by evening. He locked up the garage and stepped outside. The street was peaceful now, the sun low in the sky. He hoped the day's events had settled things once and for all, but he also knew life rarely worked that smoothly. As he walked to his car, he noticed something unusual across the street. The woman was there again, standing near her truck, looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. It wasn't anger, but it wasn't friendly either. It was something else, something he couldn't ignore, and deep down, he knew the story wasn't over yet. In fact, he had a feeling the real trouble was still ahead. The garage owner woke up the next morning feeling the weight of everything that had happened over the past few days. He tried to shake it off as he got ready, telling himself that maybe things would finally settle down now. Maybe the woman had learned her lesson. Maybe she would stop blocking the entrance. Maybe all of this was finally over, but deep down, he knew better. Something in her eyes the night before had told him that whatever she was thinking or planning wasn't finished. There was a heaviness in the air, the kind that warns a person that the calm they see is only temporary. He drove to the garage early again, hoping for a peaceful start. The streets were empty, and the morning felt cool and quiet. When he reached the garage gate, everything looked normal at first. No trucks, no arguments, just an ordinary morning. He breathed out slowly. Maybe he had been wrong. Maybe she wasn't going to cause any more trouble. He opened the gate, walked inside, and began checking things around the garage like he always did. He wanted to keep busy, to get his mind focused on work, instead of worrying about the woman's next move. But as the sun rose higher, he started noticing things he had overlooked before. A couple of things inside the garage seemed out of place. A box that he had stacked neatly on top of a shelf was slightly crooked. A door that he always kept closed was oddly half open. Nothing major, nothing broken. but enough to make him pause. He stood still for a moment and then said softly to himself, "Someone was in here." He walked around slowly, checking every corner. Nothing was missing. Nothing was damaged. But the feeling wouldn't leave him. Something was off. He locked the door again and stepped outside, trying to make sense of it. He wondered whether someone had been snooping around or if maybe he had forgotten to close something properly the previous day. But he wasn't careless, and he rarely forgot small details like that. As he stood there thinking, he noticed her walking down the street. The same woman. Her expression was calmer today, but not friendly. It was the same unreadable look she had given him last night. She walked past him without saying a word at first. But as she reached the front of the garage, she stopped. "Is there a problem?" she asked, though her voice didn't sound like she truly cared. He hesitated. "Were you inside the garage last night?" She blinked, pretending to be confused. "Why would I go inside your garage?" He studied her face. "I don't know. But it looked like someone had been in here." She shrugged. "I don't have time to break into anyone's property. I've got my own life to deal with." He didn't know whether she was telling the truth or not. Her voice didn't shake. Her expression didn't change. She looked calm, but her eyes said something else, something he couldn't fully understand. She turned and began walking away, leaving him with more questions than answers. He went back into the garage and tried to busy himself again. This time, he locked every door twice. He checked every window, every corner. He didn't want to take chances. A few hours later, just as he was finishing up some paperwork, he heard footsteps outside. Heavy ones. He walked out again and saw 2 sheriff's department officers approaching. They greeted him politely. "Morning. We need to check the garage for equipment," one of them said. "We left some items here earlier this month and need to take them out today." Of course. Everything should be in the back, same place as before. The officers entered the garage and began checking the equipment. But after a few minutes, one of them called out, "Did you move anything in here?" The garage owner shook his head. "No, I haven't touched that section." The officer frowned. Some of the gear looks like it was rearranged. The garage owner felt his chest tighten again. "I noticed the same thing earlier. I think someone might have been inside." The officers exchanged serious looks. One of them walked closer. "Did you see anyone? Or notice anything unusual?" He nodded slowly. "Only that woman who keeps blocking the entrance. She walked by earlier. I asked her if she had been in here, but she denied it." The officers stayed quiet for a moment. Then one of them said, "We'll keep an eye on things. This space is important to us, and we can't have anyone messing around here." The garage owner felt a mix of relief and worry. Relief that the officers were taking it seriously. Worried that he wasn't imagining things, that someone had definitely been inside. After the officers left, the day continued quietly. Too quietly, he didn't see the woman again for the rest of the day. She didn't bring her trucks back. She didn't argue or stand across the street. She simply vanished. But for some reason, her silence felt more unsettling than her arguments. That evening, as he locked up and prepared to leave, he noticed something small tucked under the garage door. A folded piece of paper. His stomach tightened as he picked it up. He unfolded it slowly, unsure of what he would find. On the paper, written in rushed handwriting, were the words, "You should be careful who you let use this place." No signature. No explanation. Just those words. He felt a chill go down his spine. He looked around the street, but no one was there. The road was silent. He took the note inside and placed it on the table, staring at it. The message didn't make sense. Who was it meant for? Was she warning him? Threatening him? Or trying to hint that someone else had been involved? He thought about calling the sheriff's department immediately. But something made him wait. He needed to think. To understand. To breathe, he sat down and replayed everything from the start. The trucks blocking the entrance. Her stubborn attitude. The argument. The officers arriving. The feeling that someone had been inside the garage. Her strange look the night before. And now this note? Nothing connected clearly, but something felt wrong. Like there was more happening beneath the surface. The next morning, he returned with a clearer mind. He approached the sheriff's department and showed them the note. They took it seriously. "Do you think she wrote it?" one officer asked. "I don't know," he replied honestly, "but something isn't right." The sheriff's department decided to look deeper into the situation. They asked for more details, more dates, more information. The garage owner told them everything he remembered. In the days that followed, they increased their visits. They checked the garage more often. They made sure everything was secure, and slowly, the tension began to fade. The woman stopped showing up completely. Her trucks never returned. She didn't walk past the garage again. It was as though she had disappeared entirely. No more arguments. No more strange looks. No more notes. Life at the garage slowly returned to normal. The owner worked peacefully again. He stopped double-checking every corner. He stopped expecting trouble every morning. He even started sleeping better. But every now and then, when he locked up at night, he would still think about that note. About the trucks. About her eyes. And every time he did, he felt grateful that he had taken the situation seriously. That he had stayed calm. That he had called the sheriff's department when he needed to. He learned something important through all of it. Sometimes, standing alone isn't enough. Sometimes people try to push their way into your space, your peace, your boundaries. And sometimes the only way to protect what is yours is to speak up, stay calm, and get the right people involved. He never saw the woman again. The story eventually faded from his daily leaf. But it never left his memory. And whenever he opened the garage gate each morning, he felt a quiet reminder of everything he had gone through. A reminder of how quickly things can change. How small actions can grow into big problems. And how important it is to guard your peace. The garage remained his space again. Quiet, steady, and safe. And he never took that calm for granted again.